Thank you so much for coming to this presentation, and thank you so much to the Portland Art Museum for inviting me to do this talk about my works and also in relation to works of the Art Museum here. And basically the topic I'm going to talk, and please, if you have any questions at any moment or any time, so please let me know, is about the relationship between the mural movement that we can trace the origins in Mexico with the relationship with the mural movement in the United States. And we have another piece here that is from this author, that is Hiller. So basically these two works are the reference that I'm going to start talking about. And what is the relevance of these works and the work of these painters into the mural tradition and also into the relationship between Mexico and the United States. And also how that relationship evolves into a mural movement in the United States that basically is the one that we have in full force now. As you can see, Portland having a lot of murals everywhere popping up in many areas and many buildings now. And also I'm going to comment about the struggle that we have to go through the mural regulation here in Portland at one point. And basically what I started is this work of Diego Rivera, they call Los Frutos, the fruits. And basically this artwork, the original one, it came and it was painted at the Ministry of Education in Mexico City. I took that photo when I went last year there, and I usually don't visit that, but it was very curious that I went there this time, and I took the photo of that without knowing that I will be talking about this print here that is part of the collection of the museum. So Diego Rivera, well, you know, some of you probably are familiar with who was Diego Rivera. And Diego Rivera was one of the three great ones, or Los Tres Grandes, one of the three ones, mural painters from Mexico City. So after the Mexican Revolution, and after being Diego Rivera, having a career in Europe and have a dialogue with other painters like Picasso, like Matisse, like Modigliani, with other painters that scene, he decided to come back to Mexico and work in the process of reconstructions of the Mexican society. Because after the Mexican Revolution, pretty much the whole society was destroyed. So that is basically what implies a revolution, that all the institutions are destroyed, the government is destroyed, and also the army is destroyed. So that is the concept of what we have about a revolution. So he came, and then he started painting subjects related to this time, to the people. And it was the first time that a painter, in a very, very consistent way, was like approaching the subjects of the people. Some other painters in Mexico before that period, so they were painting elements of the Mexican society, yes, but with this intention that Diego Rivera has with this social content and social ideology that was member of the Communist Party, it was something new, because he was bringing an image or a message and an image as well, and a utopian world where the people can have a better society after and reconstruct the society after a revolution. And basically what we see here is this kind of idyllic relationship, and the frutos taking, you know, the fruits from the tree, and then this sharing of the fruits of the work, basically. So these are elements that they are part of the ideology of Diego Rivera as a utopian, because he is basically, he at one point belongs to the Communist Party, the Mexican Communist Party, and he was basically bringing all these elements of the reconstruction of the society in a utopian way, with equality, social justice, different elements. In addition to that, so he was depicting the people there with the features of the Mexican people, trying to get away from the European models. So, and as we can see here a movement that for the first time trying to respond to the European influence. So that European influence that they've been having for 500 years, basically, that they impose the European standards of beauty, aesthetics, ideology as well. And then through the Mexican Revolution, they trying to break those molds, even with techniques. Of course, this technique that he was using here is fresco. But over the years, they developed new materials. And some of the other mural painters, like Siqueiros, they brought the use of acrylic. We know the acrylics now, yeah? So we paint and all that stuff. The first use for artistic purpose was made in Mexico. Mm-hmm. We know very little about that. Why? Because we don't have information about Mexico and the United States. You know? Why? Because it's part of this ideology that basically denies or ignores or misinforms about the Mexican contributions into the society. So, but at the beginning, the first years of the Mexican movement, many of the painters ended up painting on fresco. So as we can see here, so then they jump into, for example, in this case, lithography, because the lithography was a good resource for the painters to reach more people. And basically those were the two ideas around the ideology of the new artist. So the mural painting that will reach large amount of people, and then prints as well. Unfortunately, Rivera didn't work in so many prints, and basically we have just only one collection of this. They're trying to reach the public of the United States, and that's why it's very valuable, this work here. So,
So this piece followed the mural?
The mural, yeah. So the mural was, that was done before. I mean, that was done first. So then that was 1928-9 when he painted all these walls of the Ministry of Education. So, and this basically, that's what we have, this kind of dialogue, especially with mural painters and public art. We have like small pieces, small scale pieces, and then jump into the large scale because it's a way of practice, elements of composition, elements of different artistic elements of the content of the artwork. So, but the influence, what we start experiencing here in the United States of the mural movement was during the recession, with the WPA, the Works Progress Administration. And basically one of the other two muralists, or the three muralists that we were mentioning, that is Orozco, came here to the United States and was painting murals, along with Siqueiros and along with Rivera. And then in this visit, he was here, Orozco. Basically, he recommended to one of the assistants of Roosevelt, basically, to develop a program in which, after the Depression, basically large numbers of people were living in poverty, and especially the artists were hit greatly by this situation. So, with the same policies and with the same kind of tenure, that the Mexican revolutionary government gave the walls to the artists. So the government of Reconstruction, with the New Deal, gave the walls to the artists again. And then they developed this kind of contracts with artists to paint, the murals that you see, for example, in all post offices, or different public areas that they are dating from the 1930s, the 1940s in the United States. And this is basically one of that, the result of this work is the result of that. And as you can see here how this movement influenced not only in terms of the policy making of the government of that time through the implementation of the New Deal, but also in the process of sometimes the style, because Orozco and Rivera, in particular Rivera, was working with a lot of students or a lot of assistants that they ended up like a painting with this kind of realistic style. But also during this period, we have to keep in mind that it was during the period of before the war, the Second World War, and they have a message, a social message that was very strong in the content of the painters of the WPA. So So it's what we have there. That's why we have this dialogue of these works in United States. And then we jump into the mural movement, because many, this painter also have murals. So he executes murals, one very beautiful in California, in San Francisco, that basically depicts with a very, very colorful images, an aquarium. That is basically far away from this kind of images with this kind of colors, that they were like a more earth colors and muted. So what we see here is the development of the mural movement from artists, from masters basically, that basically goes from the revolutionary movement until 1950s, 1960s. What we have later on coming is the development of community murals in the United States. While the movement of the mural renaissance, or the mural Mexican renaissance, was basically pretty much funded or supported by the government in Mexico. The new mural movement that we will see during the 60s is going to be a mural movement coming from the communities itself. So, and then they don't want to rely on fundings from governments or big institutions necessarily. It's going to be a movement that we know now with community murals. And later on, of course, at the beginning they were related to vandalism or to people taking the walls and denounce injustice, especially during the 60s. That was basically the movement and the way that it was basically initiated. And then during the 70s is when it started taking shape, that movement in which, for example, the walls of New York or Chicago or California or in LA or in San Francisco were taken by the local community artists. They were not necessarily master painters or professional artists. They were community artists from the community. But at the same time, what they have in common is that it was a policy that they're trying to implement from the beginning, and intentionally in some of those cities, that they will have a master mural painter guiding local community artists. Sometimes yes, sometimes not. But for example, in the case of California, the case of LA, we have that with Judy Baca, for example. So we can go to the next one. So this work that I did was is when I started learning for the first time about mural painting in Mexico. And I was doing my research in anthropology, and I was doing my degree in social anthropology and ethnology. At the same time, I saw that somebody was painting the walls in my university. I was there. So, and then the person that was painting, that was this a Mexican artist called Arnold Belkin, that curiously, he is from the Northwest. So you see, I don't know if it's part of the destiny or something, and he's from Vancouver, Vancouver, BC, but Mexican painter, because he was living there for, I don't know, for forever, basically, because he was also one of the disciples of Siqueiros. So he actually worked with him and learned, the fundamentals of what is a mural art. Because basically one of the things that they propose on the Mexican mural movement, that a mural painting is the result of a discipline. A mural painting is not just decoration. It's not something that is beautiful and is nice, and I have an empty spot here, and then I'm going to put something on the wall, and then I'm going to call it a mural, It's basically what we have that perception. And yes, that is a mural, yes. But what they were proposing on this mural movement, it was a discipline in which you have to study the environment. You have to study the audience that they are going there. So you have to study what's the interaction. So what is the perspective? What is the angle that is going to be perceived? All these different elements. What is the materials? For example, Siqueiros, that was his teacher of Arnold Belkin, was saying that you are not able to create new art if you are still using old materials. So that's why he started experimenting with industrial painting, industrial paint. What is the industrial paint? Basically, the paint for cars, the paint for ships, and all because they are those kind of paint went through a process of testing, and they were new materials with synthetics materials. That's why he started using acrylics as a new material. And then in Mexico, the Polytechnical Institute in Mexico developed, the formulas to work with acrylics for artistic purposes. So simultaneously, in the United States, they use also acrylic, but in Mexico, they use with that purpose, with acrylic. So then we are here in my university. I'm here still with hair, so believe it or not, at one point I have hair. So, and then we have here the different parts. So I was working in different areas. He allowed me to work. So these are the two walls that we work. Fortunately, the building was able to survive the big earthquake in 1985. And then this was the second commission that he was working for the university, and I was able to keep working as an assistant as well. So it was very, very interesting and very incredible experience, because it was the first, for me, for the first time, I was able to interact with people, painting at the same time in public. So usually I didn't like to be in public painting. I was always working in my studio and painting in the solitude of my studio. Still, I'm doing that too. But when I was working in a mural, so you are the target of comments from both sides. You can't escape. And then it was very interesting, and I enjoyed that situation as well a lot. So. And then basically they give me all these different elements to work in the future on that. So the first commission that I got to paint a mural for an institution here was for Oregon State University, for the Memorial Union, to paint this mural for the Latino, La Casa Latina, no La Casa Latina, the La Raza Room at the Memorial Union. And basically, they were renovating the whole room, and then actually won an award for the concept and the development of the proposal. And then basically, what I'm trying to do, and this is basically what basically all this time is really so hard for me to deal with, is basically what I'm trying to depict is, the people that they are working, and they are immigrants. They are coming, and they are following a path to the future, but also they are following a path to education. And this is the Memorial Union of the university, reflecting, the contemporary societies here with elements from the history, from the conquest, and for the pioneers. And in this side, so we have elements from the native cultures or other cultures that basically are part of the U.S. society as well here. The Native American, the Black culture, the Mexican origin people. And then we have, at that point, we have a comment here. So that was the Hail Bob. Mm-hmm.
What's their hands?
The hands has, sorry for the resolution, it's not very good resolution, but in the hands, she has the tools of knowledge. Basically, a pencil, a pen, and a brush. And that is the tools of transformation. Mm-hmm. Those are the weapons. For me, those are the weapons. So those are my weapons. And then here we have, the Hail Bob that at that time was coming. And then I finished this commission when the Hail Bob went around the sun. So it was pretty cool. So to have like that part of the. Mm-hmm.
So would you consider a community muralist to be somewhat of a utopian like Diego Rivera, because you're sending a message that has to have sort of a positive attitude towards it?
In a way, yes, but I don't think that I will be a utopian, because in the case of Diego Rivera, he was depicting very specific situations of an ideal society. And in my case, I'm not trying to depict situations or scenes of an ideal society. Basically, what I'm depicting here is people going to pursue education. So that's what they did. And that is basically the path to follow. And that's basically what we see now with the dreamers. So that's why those are my heroes. So, and then that is the future, yeah, always the reference to manhood as a future, a better future, and then the sun of a new era, basically. Those are hopes for the better future. That's why I like to live that element in a very open meaning. So a better future, something that is going to change for good, but not to give specific elements, because at the end I know that the more deep transformation is going to be the individual transformation from each one of us to build a new society. It's not by imposition, it's not by violence, it's by the deep conviction of each one of us to change our society for good. And that is also the position of Orozco, for example. Orozco was, while Diego Rivera was very utopian, he was a member of the Communist Party and he was very active. He basically helped to get asylum to Trotsky, that was fleeing from Russia because he was a Jew, working for the Mensheviks. That was the opposition party of the group of the Bolsheviks, and then coming and trying to be more progressive in many ways. Still, his approach about society was create this kind of revolution with these very utopian elements. So, but in the other case, we have Orozco, that it was very, very dissolution with the revolutionary movements, because the only thing that he saw was carnage and destruction and masses, So and he was basically, in one of his main works that is in Guadalajara, you see a Men on Fire, basically emphasizing the importance of the transformation of men by himself in a mystic way. So that is basically, in that position, I like to position myself in between the two of them, without having this kind of disillusion attitude or kind of disappointed attitude that Orozco was having. So, sure.
Staying on the topic of the utopian, the revolution affected people differently, like you said, Cicadas and Rivera. After other revolutions, like the Russian Revolution, French, even in Cuba, are there muralists, or do you know of other painters that had the same attitude as Rivera? Seeing the people in positive light?
What I see is, like, in terms of graphic arts, probably they don't have that prominent figures. Probably in music, they have more in Cuba that they are very, very famous for. So, of course, I saw that they have like a murals, but sometimes I see that they are inviting other painters, and many of the painters and artists basically flee the island. So they have, of course, programs about public art as well there, but probably because of the lack of resources too, that they don't have that much, massive investment that they could have other societies. Or like, for example, even if Mexico didn't have that massive investment, so they have a constant investment on public art, constant, with the reconstruction of the Mural Movement. But yeah, of course, so this is a very interesting point, because not only Mexico developed this kind of artwork, so that at one point I tried to get away from, ideologies or an ideological work that becomes more like a pamphletarian, or like a pamphlets, or like a propaganda, trying to avoid that. So why? Because when you develop an art that responds to a specific ideology, sometimes you limit yourself. Because for me, the more important aspect is exploring the different dimensions of the human being and the expression of those concerns and issues. And of course, there are the social dimension, of course. We cannot avoid that. But again, going back to that, so then what is interesting is that Mexico offered this movement. So, and also, for example, the Russian Revolution or the Chinese Revolution developed their own lines of work with, this heavy social content that was pretty much propaganda. They have a specific style developed that was repeated over. And you see Comrade Mao and Comrade, Lenin, and everybody's happy behind him, and et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, that is basically a state art. But Diego Rivera, that's the point, why so relevant, Diego Rivera and Siqueiros, for example. Even they work with the state, even they work with this kind of ideology in many ways, with this social commitment. So still, they didn't follow into propagandistic work. So that is the other thing. So that was so relevant, this kind of work, and was so impact the world. Not only here, like for example, you see in the third world countries, when they have revolutionary movements or movements of change, like for example in Philippines, you have that influence of this kind of hard work too. So then I start getting commissions after I finished my program in Oregon, University of Oregon in art. So. But then I didn't work full time. As you can see, I paint elements of multiculturalism here, basically focusing on the new generation and planting the trees for a better future. Basically, that is the image that following the same kind of idea. I painted this. This was the first mural, exterior mural that I was painting. And as you can see, it was a mural related to farm workers that this nonprofit organization that was a housing development corporation, basically they have this low-income housing that focus on providing housing, but also providing the conditions to break the cycle of poverty. And then one way to do that is also to provide, the different elements, like, for example, a community center, classes or workshops that they can provide inside of that housing development. And this mural was painted on the community center of the development. We can see here that is the new generation that emerged. So elements of change. I start using the elements of the butterflies as symbolic elements of change and transformation. And then here we have at the front ground, everything is black and white, reflecting the harsh conditions of the farm working people, and how Cesar Chavez was working with them to overcome the harsh conditions of the working class, especially the farm workers. So, a child working next to an elderly, an old lady, still that you can see in some of the fields. So, but in the same time, we have all cultures from Mesoamerica emerging. That is the strength of what we have in those communities. So then I paint this mural for Woodburn High School. And then basically it was element for, more specific for the title was related to community leaders because it was for one of the sections of the high school in Woodburn. It was related to the Academy of International Studies. And they're going to have a strong content about leadership and social justice. So basically what I put here is like two panels that we can flip those two panels in different ways and have another configuration. But again, here we have, again, the border, again. I'm talking about that. So we were talking about, I painted them in 2007, and still now we start struggling with this issue again. And then here we have the future, again, with Mount Hood, Lincoln, the image of Lincoln, and different leaders and historical and not historical of the movement, the historical movement towards a better future. So with elements from the society here, Martin Luther King, and that helped me to develop this mural painting that I painted here. So I don't know if you're familiar with that mural in Powell on 13. And basically it's the same elements here. What happens here is that I submit the proposal to RAG to get a funding for painting this mural. And then they say no. And then at that time was recently implemented a new mural program with new regulations because the city was fighting for 10 years with Clear Channel because Clear Channel was mentioning that, according to the position of the litigation, that they were affected, or the freedom of expressions of Clear Channel was infringed by the decisions of the city giving the walls to local people or local artists. So because it's a media company, a billboard company, that they feel that they were treated unfairly by the city because the city was giving the walls to the local artists. So, of course, it was a whole process of litigation. At the beginning, the judge fails in favor of Clear Channel because the city was providing, grants and providing all those spaces. But then they appeal, and then after the appeal, they show that basically, because Clear Channel is a person, corporations are persons, yeah. So, and then basically it was the voice of Clear Channel being affected by other artists. But then when the appeal came, they say, no, it's, yes, one person, but it's the voice of the collectivity. It's we, the people, basically, are the ones that we decided what we like to see in our communities. And then the judge finally failed in favor of the city, of RAC, basically. So they didn't have to pay the tax, the $1 million that they were expecting. Plus, Clear Channel after that was demanding compensations for the litigation process that took 10 years of all those legal fees. And the city said, no way. So you get in trouble in this, and you start initiating this, so it's on your own risk. So finally, I was able to, we start painting murals in 2006, from 2006, and now you see murals all over. No? But during 10 years, you didn't have murals around Portland. And what happens here is, basically I was submitting this proposal to RAC, says, well, this is my proposal. And I say, no way, I mean, they didn't accept the proposal. Because they say, oh, you're saying that it's about leaders of the civil rights movement, but what we see here is that you have here the pyramid that is basically a place where they perform sacrifices, human sacrifices, and then you have the pioneers that basically they came here and killed, the Indians. And basically that was the position of the committee at RAC. And I told him, well, I mean, it's your point, your perspective, but it's my perspective, and that is my voice as an artist. And for you, probably that is a place where people perform human sacrifices. But for me, it's a cosmic clock in which the Mayas or other Mesoamerican civilizations basically create these monuments according to archaeoastronomical observations. And therefore, for me, it's not just a place where they were killing people. It was more a place where they were bringing all the knowledge and the sophisticated knowledge that they have about the cosmos. And they were cosmic clocks. And then, the pioneers is part of the history of Oregon. So I appeal, I complain to the city, and then finally they say yes, because they were afraid probably that another lawsuit will come up out of that, so, which I was not interested at all. So I was interested just only keep painting.
I'm sorry to say I don't know the two bottom figures. I just see Chavez and Martin Luther King, but who is the Native American and who is the female?
Yeah, Chief Joseph and Susan B. Anthony. So I try to make it like a local, regional, and international as well. So, and in this case, we have the victory of the process of the civil rights movement. And then here we have, the Statue of Liberty, basically, granting all those rights to the people. So give me your poor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So as part of the immigrants, but it's also this movement. So then I paint this other mural that was here at Beaverton in Watson and Farmington Road. And then basically I did that with a new technique that was a fabric that you painted indoors, and then basically you just installing one one shot basically. Like take me like 1 week to do the installation of that. So, and then at that time I started working with mosaics. So then I started like incorporating elements from the mosaic effects. So, and then that, and again here, I'm hoping for a better future, but the only way that we're hoping for the better future is in a true transformation of men. And basically I have those butterflies there. So, and then the butterflies as, representing not only elements of metamorphosis, but also the environment as well. Because we know that when we have a healthy environment, we have bugs around, yeah? So we have butterflies, we have bees, we have all those bugs, beneficial bugs and bad bugs too. But that is also a strong element that I like to incorporate is the environment. So we have another piece of here, Diego Rivera, that was basically working on landscapes. So he was also enjoying working on landscapes, and I've been working on landscapes as well. And basically here is like, the high school, the old high school, that was basically the reference of Beaverton, but this project was a project that I worked with students from the Merle Station High School, that they were basically located on the first building of Intel. So Intel donated that building to the school district, and they were working there. It was funny, this project, so now I remember, so that basically I worked on this project, and then they hired me, and then we started working with students, and we started developing the proposal. So I have all this brainstorm with the students from different ethnicities, and then I came up with a proposal to paint in one of the walls of the building of Intel. That was for Intel before, but it was the high school. And then the principal was all excited. Oh yeah, we have all this, so they're going to take it to the superintendent of the school district. And then the superintendent of the school district said, no murals, and not walls in any of the schools of the school district. So then I have this. We have already the grant for a small mural that was basically 10 feet. There was this size mural proposal at the beginning. And then I have, what we're going to do? We start already spending money on this mural, so we need to finish and accomplish this project. So then I went like a crazy, and I started like visiting, knocking doors of different business around the downtown area in Beaverton. And then I saw the wall, and I asked this guy, so you like to have a mural? So, and I show the publications of my works and some European books. And I said, oh yeah. So then it was like 82 feet long, so it was like a huge. So then it's like we need to get more funding. And then we start looking for funding, and then the Beaverton Art Commission start like creating this program. That was the public art program. And then we submit the proposal, and then they give us the grant, and then we were able to basically cover the expenses for the mural. And it was super cool because we were able to finish this on time, and it was one, if not the first, but it was pretty much one of the first murals painted for the new art program that they have Beaverton for the public art program. In the same way that the other murals that you saw, I didn't show you, but I have another work that I did with Isaka Samsudin, that is another local painter, African-American painter. It was one of the first murals that we paint after the implementations of the new mural regulation here in Portland. But then, yeah, they just implement that in 2009, and then I made this. Was my first mosaic. I did this mosaic, and it was 62 feet long, and it was basically a wall to divide the public area and the housing development that they have. And it was a theme, it was about Miraflores, that was about flowers. So I used the elements of the flowers from the indigenous designs, so to create a sense of a cycle of the flower life up to the end with seeds here. So then from the germination to the flowering or the blooming of the flower up to the pollination, and then the wiltering of the flower to the creation of the seeds. So that was my first. I mean, it was a challenge for me because I haven't worked on mosaics. So I know that it was part of the mural tradition, and actually one of the arts of mosaic doing or mosaic making in Mexico was basically developed through the development of the mural movement in Mexico. Because those muralists, at the same time that they have all these designs, so sometimes they were asked to have a mosaic. So basically they develop just the design, and then they send that to this mosaic place that calls Perdomo in Cuernavaca. And then Perdomo ended up like executing, those mosaics. So that's why it was my interest on working on mosaic, and explore that technique as well, because it was part of the techniques that they were using. Also, plus it's more durable than a mural painting, because the mural painting fades or is, is exposed to the elements, but this lasts pretty much forever. Yeah. So that's why I decided to work more, and so we have this another work that I did. So, and I came working on, this is more about a landscape, but again, it's symbolic elements of the landscape, using the butterflies as a way to reflect the dawn of a new era, of a new society as well. So here, the building next to that is, they asked me to do a painting, and in this case, it was a painting for the alternative clinic, alternative medicine clinic, and this is in 49th Division. And then both of them, I try to develop a narrative that continues, or they have a dialogue between these two. This one we have here, the butterflies again, and then the healing, and this process of healing, that the lotus flower and Oriental culture means, the overcoming of difficulties, and the purity at the end is what emerged out of that muddy situation. But what we have here is the context of an ideal city that is Portland, basically, clean, but also the healing in this process. So as you can see here, the two buildings are there, trying to develop this kind of dialogue between the two. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you have people helping you, or do you paint them?
No, I always have, especially when I'm working on this, and mosaics more than that. I always have assistants, or when I'm working in the size, usually I have, when it's painting is not that difficult, I can work by myself, but usually I have one or two assistants or volunteers. But in terms of the mosaics, I have to have assistants. I have to pay them because it's more labor intensive and requires a lot of skills. So I'm not able to, I can teach them, but it's like I start from zero. So that is something like, so. Mm-hmm.
So are you able to teach mural painting while you produce a mural?
It's usually what I try to do. That's basically what I'm the programs that I try to implement at Portland State University. That I'm so lucky working and allowed to propose this kind of projects, because basically what the best model that you have when you are teaching something is by doing things. Because I know that I can have the option to teach this in a theoretical aspect, but if you are not immersed in the processes, if you are not like, for example, in this case, like getting paint and get dirty and then messy, and if you are not there, so then you don't learn, basically. So, and that is basically what I like to see. I didn't include the images. I usually have this PowerPoint presentation in which I add elements of, the process in which the students are. I hope I can save it now. I don't remember if I save it or not. But as you can see that I have like a space like this, like I unroll, the whole thing, and then it's a big churro. And then I unroll it, and then I start painting on the floor. And then, and in the case of the mosaics, I have to have a big table and then put one thing. But yeah, I have to have, that is the best model. It's basically the model of pupil, teacher, or master painter, or master artist, and pupil. That is the best one. So that's why I prefer to hire assistants that they took my classes, but sometimes it's very difficult. Sometimes it's people that are more interested on the field, on the trade. Mhm. So then I paint this mural for La Casa Latina here at Portland State University in one of the courses. And also that is basically, we use the course that I was teaching for La Casa Latina. And again, here we have here the students, the migrant students that they go to university pursue education. Curiously, there was, this is the original image of this at the center. And when I was painting that mural, I was hanging that mural, they told me, oh no, she's naked, so we have to cover her. I said, what? You see, we're in 2000 what? 2011, and still struggling with those things. Oh no, you have to paint it, or to have to cover, that part. And then the mural already was in place, and I have to put, I mean, it's like a,
So you covered her like with an orange body?
yeah, like a piece of like a shawl thing that was like a covering. But you see, those are the things that you have to do also. Of course, if you don't, I mean, I'm flexible enough to do that, and up to the point that I don't compromise things. So for me, I'm not compromising my main message that is here, that is basically pursuing education. If we work together, we are able to transform ourselves, and we can now reach to, the sky is the limit. Because I put here the image of Jose Hernandez. I don't know if you know Jose Hernandez, but this is, he was a migrant worker picking cucumbers and strawberries in the fields in California, and he ended up being one of the astronauts of the shuttle. Mm-hmm. And I met him later on, and then I showed him the mural and all that stuff. So, but as you can see here, so then basically, the sky is the limit. So through education, you can go through that, and you can transform yourself in whatever you can pursue your dreams. That's why this was an honor to the dreamers. Mm-hmm.
Now, the murals can be inside or outside.
Mm-hmm.
And is that indoors?
Yeah, that is indoors.
Okay, so what do you use?
Canvas, in this case, canvas. Because, I mean, I'm using the same kind of quality of paint. And usually that quality of paint that I'm using is for exteriors, because it's so good that I prefer to keep using, even if it's indoors. That is one thing, and that is a very good question, because when you have an indoor mural, it's a different approach than when you have an outdoor mural. So you have to think about how people is working. For example, the mural that we saw before, not here because the street is very close. I mean, it's a very narrow street. But what the one that you see here, so you have to think, what is the composition that I want to have in this big wall? And it has to be very bold, the composition. Very big elements. Because when you are driving there, you're driving and you have like how many seconds you have to see that mural. So then the composition changed too. So you have to use another approach. And in this case, I used the rose. Basically, I didn't talk about the rose, but the rose represents Portland. And the Portland, this blooming flower means the Portland honors the legacy of the civil rights movement. So, and that is really what I truly believes about this city too. So that is so amazing in that aspect. But yeah, so then basically you have just only a few seconds if you are driving, and then basically you're going to pay attention to 3 elements at the most. The rose, the Statue of Liberty at the most, and then this is because the most eye-catching thing. So, and then basically you put the elements together later on. If you have time, so then you will stop by and then see more in detail the other elements. And then you can build that narrative later. Mm-hmm. So then the next mural that I did was this for Wellness Center. And that is the Virginia Garcia. And then basically, usually what happens is, again, here, is that usually when they call you to do a mural is because they think, oh, I'm going to have empty spaces, so we need to fill those empty spaces. But no, when you have a muralist, you need to talk with the muralist from the beginning of the development of the project. because in that way you can assign spaces and design spaces. And at the beginning, for example, these spaces were one door here. So, and I say, please move that door out of the way. So, and then I can use the whole space, even if the columns are, crossing this, because when you drive, basically what you see is the cut of the columns. The columns are cutting the mural. But when you are walking, you don't pay attention more on that. So you pay more attention about the narrative of the painting, that is the mosaic. That is the one. So basically, walking here or walking inside those arches here. So and basically, this is the image here. And again, it's about communities of origin. You know, the story of the kid is Virginia Garcia, and Virginia Garcia was a kid that ended up dying in the fields while her parents were picking strawberries. And so she passed away because of the basic healthcare that they didn't have access to. So she got all ill, and then she ended up dying. And then basically they create this foundation. And then the way to create the narrative was the kids are playing, and then they disappear here. Here we have the strawberry flowers, and then in this way the kid ended up like becoming a butterfly, because they don't want to have any reference of death or elements of depicting in a graphic way the death of that child. So again, the elements of the butterfly as a transformation. So then I did this exchange program with the National School of Painting in Mexico City. And then we were talking about, again, with the students from there and students from here, from Portland State University, what kind of theme we will develop for that mural. And they agree about how those two countries basically are dividing a region by creating this wall in this way. As you can see, because it's a very long wall, so how is this? How the perspective changed? So we have the communities of origin here, and then the wall here. We know with the smuggler here and these cities inside the United States. But overcoming that, we have here the dialogue. So that is a symbol of dialogue from the Mesoamerican tradition. And then we have here the butterfly, too. That is representing, again, migration, too. Mm-hmm. So basically, we know that the monarch butterflies is the best example of how migratory animals doesn't recognize borders. So, and basically, the impact of the border that we have now, I mean, as a proposal, is basically going to disrupt ecological areas in a negative way, and they're going to put in danger some species too. So that is basically what we are fighting for. So the taking care of, caring for the environment. So then in the same way, so, and this is another housing development, and then we have here elements of mosaics for the recreational area that they have at the center of the housing development with images or landscapes from Oregon. And from here we have other elements from Oregon, and here from Mexico or Central America that we have here. And again, we have migratory animals, like, for example, the swallows, and then the butterflies. So this was another work for an elementary school that David Douglas, and was an extension that they built to the school for the Learning Center. And basically, this is about the tree of life, tree of knowledge, or learning tree, using the image of the tree of knowledge. But the learning tree is basically how the students engage on learning activities, and also the caring of the environment that we have in here. So with Portland here and bridges too. So I'm in favor of bridges instead of walls, as you can see. So this was a mural painting that I did for Beaverton. And in this way, you can see here the influence from the mosaic works. So on the mosaic approach. So using the brush strokes and then working on unifying the composition in this. And basically, those are elements of that basically pay homage to the beauty of the region, yeah? That unfortunately now we have on fire, yeah? So then the moment of, so then I did this with Mark Brody here, this project. We did this project, and that was the Virgin of Guadalupe for the Grotto. So using traditional elements or traditional materials for the Byzantine glass, and it was a fun project. So there were 3 panels, so basically the moment of the apparition, and the moment of the proofs to the friar Zumárraga, and those elements are very important in the Mexican culture that basically are part of the beliefs. This goes beyond the Catholic Church. This image is more about the spirituality and the traditions of Mexico that is not necessarily just the Catholic Church. So something that we need to understand more, how rooted this image. In Mexico says that even atheists are Guadalupanos, no? From the Guadalupe tradition, even atheists and other creeds too, because it's a cultural element and an element of the spirituality, not necessarily to the official institution of the Catholic Church. It goes beyond that. So that's why I was happy to work in this project, because it was a very good opportunity to explore that subject. And that was last year, yeah? Yeah, so then the blessing, it was very, very touching moment, so on the blessing. And then this is the last mural that I did here, this summer I finished. It took me 1 year, pretty much, because it was very hard to find a place to complete the whole mural. And then I decided at the last moment to add the elements of the of the cliffs. In the same way that I add the element of the comet and the other mural, I decided to add this because I always add elements of the sun and the moon. Because it's part of the duality of our lives, the duality of nature, the duality in which we are immersed. So, but in this case, it's a special moon. It's not just the crescent. It's not just only the full moon, or sometimes usually I put a crescent and I put the sun. But here we have the dawn, and then we have here the moon. The moon as a well, of course, as an eclipse, but it's a moon that basically is a message for hopefully a better future. So as what we have here is elements of the butterflies again. So I'm repeating that. And elements here of the fields around Woodburn, because they have all this industry that they are taking off, and are not necessarily is just only agricultural. We have a large Latino-Mexican population there because of the agricultural activity there, but the city is growing so fast around tourists and trade and commerce, so because they have, the mall basically is what is most famous. And I like to incorporate those elements, and in the same way that I try to incorporate these elements, I try to bring the elements of the multicultural elements of the society in Woodburn, and develop a narrative in which the elements are inclusive, so in which people can see, and the different groups, different cultural and racial groups, they can see reflected. For example, in this case, we have the house of Sedlmayr, that was the founder, and the development of the town with the locomotive that connects Portland to California, and how this town basically grow, of course, after the clear cutting of the area. But at the same time, we have, this presence of the Mexican tradition here, or the Mexican communities, along with the Russians here, and also, the American communities here that we have in general. So basically, when people see this, it's my hope that at the same time, they will see them, or they will see some part of their culture. And in this process, I create a new culture. Because in this case, I'm not able to say that I'm 100% Mexican. So I'm not able to say, oh, I'm a Mexican painter. No. After being here since '93, and learning at University of Oregon and have my 2 degrees from Oregon State University and University of Oregon, I'm becoming also an American as a member of the society as well. So I'm Mexican American, yeah. Chicano, yes. Because what we have the Chicano movement is creating a new culture in a conscious way. So that basically we are creating our culture based on these different influences and creating something new. And at the same that is the process in which I not only see myself here, but I hope other members of the community, American or Russian or who knows, they can see reflected themselves in this way. And that is the process that we can create. In very simple terms, we can talk about that. And for example, when we're seeing, for example, the pizza. No? You think that the pizza is 100% Italian at this point, the pizza that we eat in the United States? No, the pizzas are not 100% Italian, so they are American pizzas, yeah? And you think that the Taco Bell is 100% Mexican? It is not. It's a product of the United States. And in this process, is basically we are creating our own culture with all these different influences. And that is basically what we need to honor and respect is the cultural differences, because all those different cultures, they bring the best of us. It's when I do these presentations in high schools, or especially in elementary schools, and I ask the students, so especially the kids, so you like piñatas? And I say, hey, yeah, I like piñatas, no? I say, you like tacos? Yeah, I like tacos. Well, you just keep in mind that you enjoy piñatas and you enjoy tacos because I keep my culture. So it's not because I don't want to be part of the society by keeping my culture. I don't want to be assimilated either. I'm integrated. I'm integral part of the society. If I were assimilated, what happens to my culture? I have to erase it. The same happens with the language. If I'm assimilated, I have to erase the tape in Spanish. So are you going to ask some other members of the community to be assimilated, like the Jewish? What would happen? So that's why we demand respect. So, and at the same time, we share the best of us. And finally, when I tell the students or the kids, I say, well, you enjoy piñatas, yeah? But guess what? If I don't keep my piñatas, you won't be able to enjoy the piñatas. So now you enjoy piñatas. So that's why it's so important that, because we are bringing the best of our culture for sharing and enjoyment. And basically that is about diversity. Diversity is you bring the best and you bring alternatives as well. So this is another view. So, and then the last one that was here. So then this is still a project still in process, so, because there are other 2 pieces. But again, it's a wall here that we have here is a wall in this street that is very, very wide. So then they're trying to bring elements in a very broad way so that the people can focus on either way the eagle or here the blue heron. And of course, later on, they will pay attention on the other elements too. But again, the composition has to be very broad, very bold, because the people are driving. So, and in that way, they will, later on, will be intrigued or they will be curious to walk or stop by and see in detail what is about this project too. So then we have here a detail of the eagle here. And again, it's like a paying homage, and this is a skyline. And then basically this is paying homage to the Columbia River and the skyline in Vancouver. And yeah, so they're creating murals in Portland. So basically this is the presentation. Yeah. So, thank you. You have any question at this point?
The butterflies must have, you touched on it a little bit, but it must have some kind of symbolic meaning.
Yeah, the symbolic meaning is this. It's transformation, metamorphosis. And if we're going to deal with the planet, we need to have deep transformation about how to relate to the planet, to to the ecology and also to other societies as well and other groups. So there are three elements that I focus on: is how to deal with the environment, how to deal with human relationships, and how to deal with with animals basically, but it's the environment. So if we treat fairly animals and other members of our community or human beings, and also we treat in a fair way and sustainable way, I would say, sustainable way the environment is. That's why I enjoy to work in this kind of landscapes too, because it's a way to display the beauty that we need to preserve and not to just throw firecrackers or and deal with it in that way with nature. So something that we are responsible to, and we need to take care of that. That's why I'm focusing on those subjects too.
Given you've worked both in Mexico and here, one of the things that I like about Spanish culture in particular, going to Barcelona and going to Mexico City, is how the public realm, it kind of extends into private property. And people that own private property love to have beauty that the public enjoys. And we don't necessarily have that ethos here, and so how have you, has that been hard to overcome here? How have you done?
Well, that is a very good question, because that reminds me about this project in the Skyline. For example, what you can see in Mexico is because we have a very long tradition of cities that they were very, very dense populated. And then you have all this artwork that basically was part of the process of sharing the artwork with the people, but also you as a private owner, they were basically have this kind of like a enjoyment or display, if you want, sometimes of opulence. But what we have here in the United States, especially with the development of the suburbia, it was the spread of the cities, and then you don't have that core of the city which you can enjoy and have a social. The social life doesn't happen there, because you have to go to a bar or you have to go to a restaurant. So the social life is not on the street. So that is basically the tendency in the United States. But for example, in this case, I was envisioning, for example, in the Skyline, you have this very long road that is very beautiful because they have like a medium. So it will be super cool to have this kind of walls all along that wall and create this kind of like a corridor of murals, for example. That will be super cool. So you can have like and that is basically the change that we have here in Portland. Also, in the way that they are urbanizing now Portland is like create a more dense populated city, and avoid the spreading of or the sprawling of the city. So basically, what you have here, when you have more dense population, so then you will have the possibilities of creating this kind of artworks as well, like murals. So that is a very good opportunity to do that. Before that, you didn't see that much murals either. So, and basically because of the way that the cities in the United States evolves, and basically they are pretty much recent, many of the cities. We're talking about like 100 and something years of Portland, yeah? And now with the new policies in place that like making more dense is also a very good opportunity to make Portland more like a pedestrian city, like in the case of the European cities, for example, or Mexico as well, so that you can see that people have the social life, of course, in the streets. So that will be a very good opportunity. And for example, say what I was envisioning in the case of Vancouver, that is very spread, to have that possibility of working on corridors of murals, because it's going to be unavoidable that they will use the car. So, but if we have this kind of like walls displaying art in that way, that will be super cool. Any other questions?
We just did an interview with a muralist who, like us in the early days of trying to deal with the city and the regulations, he did a mural on a residential house in
Oh, yeah.
St. John's.
Yeah, you have the interview, yeah. Yeah, I wish I was able to.
And just the whole idea of interviewing him and talking with him about, here people want to do it on their own. It's their
Yeah.
own, but again, the city says, no, you can't do that.
Exactly.
It's in a legal battle right now.
Yeah, that is very interesting because basically, when I remember I saw that on social media, I make the comment. So the regulation that says that less than 4 units that is not allowed has to go. That has to go because they say you can paint a mural in a place that has more than 5 units or 6 units. I don't remember the numbers of units. And then you can paint the mural, and they can give you the permit. But that has to go. So, I mean, the problem with the city regulation that we have now, it was a reactive regulation against, the pushing of corporations to control the spaces, the public spaces. So the city put in place this that is becoming the model, actually, nationwide, of how to struggle or how to fight back to a corporation that is, the corporations are always pushing the limits and everything, so controlling everything. So it was very good, but there are many things. That's why I complain. I send the complaint about not allowing me to paint that. So then, but another complaint is that one, for example. So if you are having just only one wall and you are a private owner and it's just only one house, so you can paint it. Of course, there are zonings, and in terms of zoning that they have to also go over. I know that as what they were saying that. What they proposed for the city regulation was not the best, but at least it was something in place to avoid this kind of litigations with corporations at the beginning. So, and now, of course, they were dealing with artists now. Now it's our time to define things with the local artists. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other question? Mm-hmm. No, thank you very much for coming. Yeah. Thank you.